Welcome back to Lost and Found No More Secrets. My name is Heidi, and I am the host of the show. I am joined by my co-host today, Brenda, team lead Puerto Rico. Hi, Brenda. How are you?
Hey Heidi, how you feeling today?
Doing great, doing great. So today's special guest is actually an author, and she's written several very interesting books. I just got finished with one of them this morning in preparation of the show today. And I'm really excited to have her on. She's adopted, and she's got a lot of great insight into the adoption community. So let's go ahead and bring up Julie to the show. Hi, Julie. How are you?
Hi,
Hi
Heidi.
Julie.
Hi, Brenda.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to start out with a question about what inspired you to write your memoirs. And was there a defining moment that made you say, I need to tell my story?
Such a great question. I was not a writer. I was a computer education teacher. But at 48, I was sent for a breast biopsy. And my twin sister and I, who I was adopted with into the same family, we talked about it and said, we really, between us, we had 6 children. We really need to get some medical history. So it took us 5 years to tap into everybody. There was a lot of rejection, a lot of roadblocks. That story ends crazy because I find a brother and sister that I didn't know I had. They didn't know about us. I had a crazy synchronicity with my brother. Our paths had been crossing, and he actually married the girl next door. So everybody that I told that story to was like, you've got to write a book about this. So I did. I went back to school and took classes on writing memoir. It wasn't very good in the beginning, so I took a lot of classes. And that book took me 10 years to actually get published. So in 2021, Twice a Daughter came out, and it's the story about that adoption search. I found my birth mom. She initially did not want anything to do with my sister and I, which we can talk about the shame that's around that era, the 1960s for birth mothers. We can talk about that. And my birth father, the same thing. He didn't want any real connection with us in the beginning. He actually died.
I want to go further into your biological parents, but let's start at the beginning. Let's start about your family structure growing up.
Sure.
Let's start there. Tell us about that.
Okay. So my twin sister and I were the first children that my parents adopted, and then they adopted 2 years later a little boy, and then and infertility had led them to adoption. And then they started having biological children, and some struggles there with some more infertility, but they ultimately had 3 biological children. And so we had this big, crazy Irish Catholic family growing up in the suburbs of Chicago. They're very Catholic, very strict family rules and values, which I do appreciate now as a parent and a grandparent. And I'm still very close to my younger siblings. It was a very nurturing environment, a lot of freedom back in the 1960s. Those were the days where you went out to play and you came home when the street lights came on.
Well, like I said, I did read your book, and it seemed to me the perception that I had is that you had a pretty ideal childhood with loving parents. Your mother did struggle because of the infertility issues and miscarriages. She did have periods of grief and depression, which is to be expected. But overall, I felt like it was a pretty ideal childhood growing up.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of freedom. Certainly, there was a lot of love in our household. It was also that era where corporal punishment was, you got slapped or spanked or whatever, and that, unfortunately for me as an adoptee, was really a tough thing. It was very hurtful to me, and I'm honest about that in the book. Certainly we don't parent like that anymore, and I think it's really indicative of that era.
Right.
So I have a question for you. So did the reason you said you had an ideal relationship with your adoptive family. Did it have to do with the fact that you had a biological sibling with you
Yeah.
in the family?
Yeah. Oh, so that is really the silver lining in all of this is I know how rare it is for an adoptee to be raised with a full sibling. And not
Right.
only was she a full sibling, we were twins, and the belonging was always to each other. We were always off doing things together. Certainly, I think my younger brother was part of our little pact because we were the adopted kids, but um, we all just had each other's back. But I do think you're right, Brenda, that certainly being a twin and placed in that situation was absolutely the best thing that could have happened to either one of us.
One thing you didn't talk a lot about in your book that I was curious, or not the second, the one, Twice the Family, is a lot of adoptees talk about how they think about their biological parents, especially the mom. Do I look like them? Or could I, if you're mad at your parents, my real mom's going to come pick me up
Yeah.
someday. Were you very curious about your biological family, you and your sister growing up, or was that much later?
Yes, we were. Our parents did a good job of sitting down with us every once in a while. Usually it was around our birthdays, just to check in to see where we were. Did we have curiosities about them? They had no information either. So the conversation really centered around, if you ever want to research your adoption, we will help you. And I think that honest conversation about, we don't have any information, but we're there with you, we accepted that. But like a lot of adoptees do, my sister and I would talk about it in our room, and we developed a little fantasy, which I realize now from other adoptees that that's something that we all did. We had no information, so we made it up in our heads, and that felt good. Somehow that was a resolution that our psyche accepted.
Got you. Did writing these books bring any unexpected realizations or closure for you?
Always. Like this book in particular, because it's a longer timeline. Twice a Daughter was 5 years from start to finish. I was very clear on that's the time frame that I wanted that book to be. And this one is more of the backstory to that. But it was 27 years from the beginning of the book to the end when I start my own family. And that's a lot of family history to go back and remember.
Right.
So setting that timeline in place, a lot of things became clear to me as to what was going on in my parents' lives, what had been going on in our community, and then putting my own story in the middle of that. So that was very helpful. Also, the ending chapters, as you know, because you just finished it, have to do with my husband and meeting him and
Right.
starting our own family. 3 years ago, my husband passed away from a battle with cancer. And so writing our little love story was hard, but healing too, because I reconnected to him in a different place in time than, 40 years later.
Right.
So,
I'm so sorry to hear about your husband. I did read the
Yeah.
love story, and it was very,
yeah,
very sweet.
yeah, it felt good to write about him that way. And as I said to other people, the first book, Twice a Daughter, begins with him forcing me to the issue of, this is the time you need to search for your family history. And he was kind of hard-nosed about it.
Mhm.
And I felt like this book needed to have him in it too. So it's fun
Right.
that one started with him and this one ended
Ended
with
with him.
our
Wow.
story.
That's
Yeah.
very sweet.
Okay, so you do the breast biopsy, and you and your sister say, we've got to get some answers. What was the first step? Because you were born in Illinois, correct?
Correct. And
And
in 2011, the laws in
records
Illinois,
open.
yeah, the Open Records Act.
Right.
My birth mom, as we came to find out, had used an alias on our original birth record. Not uncommon, perfectly legal back then. I know, it's so surprising. And our birth father's name was left off. So we knew we had to find her to find him. Finding her meant a judge getting involved and asking Catholic Charities to relinquish her real name, which fortunately was in their paperwork. And she had an unusual name so that she was able to be found.
Julie, I have to be honest. I work on cases of, adopted individuals looking for their birth mother. You are the first person to let me know that they could use alias. I actually had no
Really?
idea. Yeah, every case I've worked on, the birth mother's name has been the name. And there
Yeah.
was only one that we could not find her original birth certificate because they kept saying the birth mother's name was wrong. It never occurred to me that she could have used an alias.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And
you've
I
actually
had
given me
no
information
idea
I didn't
myself.
have.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, and hopefully, in any cases you work on further there, that it's in
right.
the adoption agency's files. So, but I have to say this about the search for her. I know now, because I've been in relationship with her now for almost 15 years, she was so afraid. And the fact that this letter came in the mail from me asking to be in contact with her, she had married, never told her husband. Catholic Charities had told her, this is your secret. No one will ever find you.
Right.
So she felt like the system failed her. And she was angry, not at me, but she was angry at this. The tables had been turned on her. Ultimately, she was overjoyed, but she had a lot of obstacles. She had to tell her husband first, and then she had to tell her family, and she never had any other children. So, as far as they knew, she was a childless
Wow.
woman. And so, making that change within herself, but also within her family, was a tough road for her. It took her a while. We were always very patient with her. My goal was never to disrupt her life, was just to find out who I was and what things I needed to worry about. Um, she was a little stinker though too, because she did not give me the right name for my birth father. And
Oh,
and that is one of the things that's in Twice a Daughter. One of the things that happened in there was I used the same intermediary to try and find him, and they kept coming up, blank. Um, and she knew I had some health things going on that I needed to find him, but
right.
she did not want him back in her life,
I
and
see.
she wasn't going to cough it up. I found out his real name through a genealogist who had a very strong relationship with the people in vital records in the town where they had met,
Mm.
and she figured it out. So I owe so much to Sandy Thelman for that. And obviously would never have found my brother and sister if I hadn't found my dad. So he died, my birth father died of a heart attack before
Mm.
we ever met. So I never did meet him.
Oh, wow.
Is your
Young or yeah.
is your biological mother still alive?
Yes, she is.
Good.
She's 92. And
Wow.
my adoptive mom is also 92. Because if you remember back in the day with the closed adoption era, they tried to match you as close as possible so
Right.
that you fit in and nobody asked any questions. So growing up, my people would say, "Oh, you look so much like your mom," and inside I'm going,
Uh,
"No, I can't look like my mom." But when I got pictures of my birth mom at the same age, oh my gosh, they looked so much alike. It
really?
was
Wow.
crazy. So yes, I probably did look like my adoptive mom.
Did your biological mom know she was having twins?
She did not, but
She
twins
did
ran in
not.
her family. She didn't know until my sister and I were born that she had twins. She never held us. She never saw us. She was told that that was probably advisable not
Right.
to see or hold us, and so she never even knew what we looked like. When we were exchanging cards and letters, she said that was the hardest part, was seeing us as newborn babies. And
I bet.
there's a chapter in Twice a Daughter that talks about our first birthday that we shared with her and some of the gifts that she brought. And one of them was a baby blanket. She wanted us to have a baby blanket from her,
Wow.
which was an interesting gift, and I treasure that.
What
I
do
have
you
a
have for
question.
your Go
Oh,
ahead,
I have a
Brenda.
question, Heidi. So did your adoptive parents request like having twins? Because I feel like that's very unusual that they kept you together, because if adoptive families were looking to get a baby, I would have thought that they would have separated the two of you so that two families would be able to adopt a child.
Well, two things happened. My mom and dad had checked the box on the application that they would accept twins. And the second thing is Catholic Cherries had a strict policy of always placing multiples in the same family. So
Oh,
both
okay.
things
Wow.
happened.
Interesting.
What do you hope readers, especially adoptees or those struggling with identity, what do you hope they take away from your story?
You know, one of the things that adoptees all share is this self-doubt and this struggle to find out who they are. Whether, do I really belong with my adoptive family? Do I belong with my birth family? So I think some of those issues I address in the book, but also this really important concept of belonging. And I think even now, as a widow, I am still trying to figure out what my role is and where I belong. And I think adoptees identify with the story that I tell, because I belong to my sister, but we were always trying to figure out where we belonged within the family each time another child came into the family. The family structure was always changing.
Right. The
We were always the
dynamics.
oldest, but the amount of attention we got from our parents started to, wane with more kids. I had a
Mhm.
special needs youngest sister, which changed the family dynamics tremendously. And then that sister ended up passing away at a very young age, which was another crisis that the family dealt
Wow.
with together. And so I think belonging is something very key to this book, but also to the human experience. And I think people will identify with that.
That's great. Uh, if you could go back and give young Julie one piece of advice, what would it be?
Stop being such a worrier. It's all going to work out.
That's me. I'm the worrier. I would tell myself the same thing. It's all going to be fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you also talk about when you're an adoptee that sometimes you have crisis of your own identity. You were raised Irish Catholic, you said, right?
Mhm.
But then
Right.
you, when you were doing the research on your biological family, you found out that you were descended from, you said, what was it? A Chippewa
Chippewa,
princess?
Native American.
Princess, right?
Right. Nobody gave us, well, we don't present that way. We look Irish Catholic,
Right.
but we don't present that way. But some of it makes sense. This need to be outside,
Oh,
walking and following trails and really into nature. Some of it I think does make sense, especially now that I know my half brother and that he spent a lot of time hunting and fishing with the father that we shared. So, yeah, I
wow.
mean,
That's
I think you do
interesting. I
find
thought
out
that was
stuff.
really interesting.
Yeah, I think that, I'm still trying to get my head around how I feel about that piece of my identity being withheld. There's nothing I
Mhm.
can do about it.
Mhm.
Interestingly enough, I did look at whether I could become a member of the White Earth Nation in
Okay.
Minnesota, which they were from. And because my birth father's name is not on my birth certificate,
Oh,
denied,
that's right.
totally denied.
Mhm. That's
Maybe at some
right.
point they will start accepting DNA,
Right.
and
But they're
allow
not doing
people.
it at all
They're
now.
not doing it now.
Yeah.
So another one of those like, oh, this is so unfair moments that,
Right.
um, it's part of the whole adoption thing. I have a really good friend who's also a twin. She probably will listen to this podcast, but she and I share so much of the same story, which is crazy. And that she also had trouble with her paperwork. There were always mistakes on the paperwork, and
Wow.
you try not to take it personally because you're an adult, but
Right.
they were trying to get these adoptions done as quickly as possible. And maybe people didn't care, maybe they were mistakes. My sister and I were told we were fraternal twins, and then we did DNA analysis, and we're identical.
You're
So there were a
identical.
lot of mistakes, and that's regrettable.
Yeah.
Have you met your biological mother in person?
Yes,
Tell
yes.
me about that.
Yeah, she lived in another state, and so we traveled to see her within like 2 or 3 months of her deciding she wanted us back in her life. And her husband had 3 adopted kids, so he was absolutely wonderful about receiving us and folding us into the family. I asked him one time, "How do you feel about this?" And he said, "At my age, to find out you're going to be a father again is a big surprise." So he had a good sense of humor about it, and
Right.
they really cute. Our very first Mother's Day together, we went and visited with her, and he got a cake that said "Happy Mother's Day," and so that was her very first Mother's Day that she was
Wow,
allowed
that's
to
right.
really
To
recognize,
celebrate.
yeah, that she was
Right.
a mother and that she was with her 2 daughters. So we have a great relationship. I don't see her as much as I'd like to because of the geography. And COVID has been a big problem. She's
Yeah.
in a nursing home, and they're very careful about visitors.
Oh, see.
And you said on your biological father's side, you'd mentioned a brother. Have you met him?
Yeah, he's turned into a really good friend. We share the same sense of humor, which he's thrilled about because the sister he grew up with doesn't have that sense of humor. And he's turned into a really good friend. He actually is he married my nephew, my twin sister's son, married them on my patio during COVID because he was
Oh.
a minister. And
Oh, okay.
so, yes, the family welcomed him, and my siblings that I grew up with already knew him because of this
Oh, the
family connection.
proximity. Right.
Yeah, so they already knew him, and the fact that they can call
That just
him an
blows my
in-law,
mind. That
yeah,
blows
can
my
call him an
mind.
in-law is,
That's crazy.
makes everybody smile. But a lot of adoptees have that. They'll find out. I was just reading a story about this in the news the other day. This man found out that the woman who owned the coffee shop that he went to regularly was his birth
Right.
mom.
What was his birth mom, right? I read that
Right.
one
I
too.
read that.
Yeah.
It's like, there, so I think that you just jump so far ahead in the steps of having a relationship when you already have familiarity with somebody.
Right.
I
Yeah.
know that you like, Julie, I know that you like to advocate for adoptees. What would you like to be seen change 2025 as far as
I
all of
absolutely
the
would. I wish that every state in our country had changed their adoption laws so that open records were available to everybody.
Yeah. I agree.
People my age should be able to access medical history, and there
Mhm.
should be some kind of portal, whether a birth parent doesn't want contact or not, or maybe even the adoptee doesn't want contact. There should be some kind of portal that they can access to get that information to them. And that's something that I would like to see us work harder to
Right.
achieve.
Yeah.
Do you happen to know the stats? I don't know the stats off the top of my head. How many states are open now?
It's something really small, like 15, 16,
Yeah.
17.
Yeah.
There's still just so much privacy. And my understanding from my senator in Illinois is that the adoptive parents are the ones that are really driving that they want they don't want co-parenting. They don't want interference. And I understand that. But that is such a one-sided view of the adoption equation. And if we could leave anybody with anything, it's just to sit back, listen to everybody in the conversation, try to
Mhm.
put yourself in their position and what their
Yeah.
wants and needs are, and stop being so judgmental, for gosh sakes.
Yep.
I had a friend when I was going through this search for my birth mom, good friend, and she said to me over coffee, "Don't you feel bad about what you're doing?" And I was there like,
Mhm.
I'm trying to get my medical history because,
Right.
it's important. And she said, "It's disloyal what you're doing." And she felt for my adoptive mom
Oh, wow.
that I should have had more respect for all that they did for me. And I think that's one of the myths that really needs to be debunked. Certainly, I felt like my parents did a lot for me, but my right to access medical history, I think, trumps the right to privacy on some levels.
I 100% agree with you, but what I've noticed a trend in adoption cases is people wait for their adopted parents to pass away before they go on searching for their biological family. And of course, by then it's usually too late. So
Yeah.
I guess they, feel a sense of loyalty, but I just wish they wouldn't wait so long because they miss out on the opportunity of actually meeting.
Yeah.
the
And
family.
I do think, to go one step further with that, I found that connecting with my siblings and first cousins has been so much easier because they don't carry the baggage into the relationship that the birth parents do. And honestly, I learned a lot of things about my birth mother's family from my first cousin, secrets that she wouldn't have shared, that she was protecting for some reason. So it's interesting, even if you don't connect with your birth family, the parents, because they're deceased, connecting with siblings and cousins can be equally rewarding and maybe less complicated.
Right.
Fabulous. Well, in closing, Julie, tell us how we can find your books. Well, what we'll do is when we air this, the show, we'll make a pinned comment at the top. But I happen to find your book on Kindle. Can you tell us how to find those books?
Sure. All three of my books, Twice a Daughter, Belonging Matters, and Twice the Family, are available wherever books are sold. You can get them at Target, and they're available on Kindle. There's audiobooks for the first two, Twice a Daughter and Belonging Matters, and the one for Twice the Family is in the works right now.
Oh, awesome. I'm going to have to go get Twice the Daughter because I went backwards in order. So that's going to be my next.
They're meant to stand alone. So it'll be interesting for you to see the characters in a different light later in life.
Very cool. Okay, Julie, well, we're going to wrap up the show. I really appreciate you coming in and sharing your story with us. I think that a lot of adoptees listening to this is going to get very enlightened by the conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I learned a lot from you, Julie. I really did.
Good.
Bye-bye, Julie. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Julie.
So interesting.
I found that fascinating.
I had one case. I mean, there was an Alaskan case where the birth mother used not her real name.
Really?
It only happened to me once.
Like, I didn't even think that was possible. Like, when you went in, especially relinquishing your child, I would have thought you would have to use your real name and have an ID.
I'm working a case right now where the lady, the biological mother used the adopted mother's ID when she went into the hospital.
Oh my
she just assumed the identity and used her insurance, and she just assumed the identity of the woman that ended up adopting her.
Isn't that amazing what they used to get away with way back
then? Oh, yeah, you can't do that now. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, this is going to be the last episode of season 3. I can't believe we've already made it.
I know. Whole season 3. Wow.
Right. I believe season 4. Oh, I just heard. Let's see if the producer is on it and tell me when season 4 is going to start. I want to say she said May. So, June. Thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
So, June will be when we're going to start season 4. Please come back. We really appreciate you. We have loyal fans now that we're not getting a big head, but we're very, 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 very excited fans that are continuously supporting our channel. I'm going to end it here. If you haven't already hit subscribe, please do so. And we will catch you next June. Bye.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.